Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Councillor Steve Pitt. I'm the leader of Portsmouth City Council, and I will be the chair of this meeting. Before we start, a bit of housekeeping safety information. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble by Queen Victoria's statue in Guildhall Square. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust fire marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. Everyone speaking via a microphone will be recorded and broadcast on the website, including those making deputations. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Please can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them off when they have finished. We've read the reports, although I suspect there'll still be quite a lot to say, but very specifically before we get started, I have not asked the Chief Executive to reintroduce the report since she did it at length 2 days ago, and I don't think anyone's suffering from short-term amnesia. So officers who may have any comments or answers to questions, please just stick to the pertinent bits that may have changed. We have introductions to start with. You now know who I am, and to my left,
Peter Bell, City Solicitor.
Natalie Brommer-Pearl, Chief Executive.
Paddy May, Corporate Strategy Manager.
Anna Martin, Democratic Services.
Chris Ward, Director of Finance and Resources.
Matthew Williamson, Cabinet Member for Community Wellbeing, Health and Care.
Good afternoon, I'm Councillor Lee Hunt and I'm the Cabinet Member for Community Safety and Sport.
I'm Kimberly Barrett, Cabinet Member for Climate Change and Greening the City.
Dave Ashmore, and I help oversee environmental services.
Hugh Mason, Cabinet Member for Planning Policy and City Development.
Peter Candlish, Cabinet Member for Transport.
Darren Sanders, Cabinet Member for Housing and Tackling Homelessness.
Chris Atwell, Cabinet Member for Central Services.
Ian Maguire, Assistant Director for Planning and Economic Growth.
Okay, we have apologies from Councillor Nick Dorrington, who has a family emergency that he needs to be attending to, and we wish him all the best and hope things are okay. Members, are there any declarations of interest? No, that's okay. There is one deputation today, so with your permission, just checking in with Mr. McGregor Sims, do you need to do that sooner rather than later, or are you okay to stay for a bit?
I can stay as long as you need me to.
Okay, that's fine. In which case, we will deal with the minutes of the previous meeting and the Building Control Partnership, and then we'll come to you before we do the discussion on the item 5, which is local government reorganisation, because that's the item you've just asked to do a deputation on, if that's okay with you. Good. Okay. In that case, minutes of the previous meeting, members, dated 22nd of July 2025. Are we happy that they are a true and accurate record of that meeting? So, agreed. Thank you very much indeed. In that case, we come on to item 4, which is the Building Control Partnership. And Ian, I believe you're presenting.
Happy to, Leader. This is a report seeking the necessary administrative steps to join Havant Borough Council to your existing successful Building Control Partnership, which currently consists of Gosport, Fareham and Portsmouth councils. This is unconnected to any other item on your agenda and has been many years in the making as we develop a partnership to achieve efficiencies and improvements to service. Gosport and Fareham started the partnership. Portsmouth joined it later, and now Havant has identified the opportunity to do so. The key considerations are laid out in the report. It is today to get your consent to enter into that agreement and obviously then delegate to myself with the support of legal services to update and complete the necessary legal agreements and inter-authority agreements, etc., to bind the Havant building control functions into the service and improve in the medium term building control services for all 4 councils and obviously our development industry in the local area.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Mason.
This arrangement, I think, is a very good example of a tailor-made arrangement which does not require a super council. So tie it in with the second part. It involves one thing which is quite interesting, which is the separation of the building control of Havant and East Hampshire, who have worked together ever since the arrangements between Havant and East Hampshire were arranged some years ago. But this is a sensible arrangement because it means that the urban areas can all work together. The 4 urban areas have similar building control issues and they work together quite well. It'll now allow greater specialism. It'll bring in people who can deal with the spikes which we have occasionally in building control, such as the current spike on enforcement of building control on HMOs in Portsmouth. It also gives considerable economies of scale. It enables us to combine our IT systems, to combine our backup office staff, and it should save us a considerable amount of money in the long term. It certainly makes sense, and I commend it to the Cabinet.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Members, did anyone else want to come in on this item? No. I think it's really good news. Building Control Partnership's been incredibly effective, and our friends in Havant joining, I think, is a really good move. So, members, that means we've got 3 recommendations in front of us. One to enter into agreement with Havant Borough Council, Fareham Borough Council, Gosport Borough Council for the delivery of the building control functions as set out in this report. To secondly, deliver the building control function to all 4 councils through the Building Control Partnership. And thirdly, as Ian's already stated, delegate authority to him as Assistant Director of Planning and Economic Growth after consultation with the Cabinet Member for Planning Policy and City Development, Councillor Mason, to enter into such agreements as necessary and on such terms as are reasonable, and to take any ancillary actions as are required to give effect to this proposal. Members, are we all content to accept the recommendations? Okay, so accepted, and that concludes that item. Okay, we now move on to local government reorganisation, and we do have a deputation today from Harold McGregor-Sims before we begin discussion on the item. So, Mr. McGregor-Sims, over to you.
Good evening, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on what I consider to be a very important issue. Portsmouth is my home. It's where I live. It's where I went to school. And it's where I've run local businesses for over a decade. I'm incredibly proud of this city. And I'm appalled at the government's proposal to swallow us up into some kind of South East Hampshire mega council. Now, let me be clear. Portsmouth City Council is not perfect. No council is. But people have a strong identity and a deep pride in being from Portsmouth. Why should the government take that away from us? Portsmouth City Council is financially well run. And by contrast, Fareham, Havant and Gosport are under Hampshire County Council, which, as we all know, is on the verge of bankruptcy. The government's plan would force Portsmouth residents to bail out failing services in those areas. And let's be honest, that can only lead to 2 outcomes. Either higher council tax for us, or cuts to our services. Neither is acceptable. And it's not just about money. Portsmouth residents currently benefit from services that our neighbours do not. For example, here in Portsmouth, we still have a successful youth service giving young people constructive activities and support. In Fareham, Havant and Gosport, Hampshire County Council has already abolished theirs. What incentive is this for fiscal responsibility? The fact is simple. Portsmouth is a stable, successful and financially sound council. Local residents are proud of it, and we should defend it. And that's why I fully support the Hands Off Portsmouth campaign. My only question is this: why aren't our local Labour MPs backing our city? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. You're happy to we're very welcome to remain for the rest of the discussion on this, but equally we do understand if you've got commitments elsewhere and you need to leave. That speech is normally reserved for the whoever is saying grace at the council meetings and doesn't need to sit here for the rest of the afternoon listening to us argue with each other, but I've used it for you today. Thank you very much. Members, before we get into the substantive discussion, I just want to draw your attention to the fact that we did say that the purpose of the council meeting on Tuesday was to garner opinions and thoughts from other members who are not part of the cabinet and therefore have not been as close to all of this as we have. And I thought it was a really good debate. I thought across the Labour and Conservative groups we heard really good feedback and some very sensible and measured input, and I'm very grateful to them for that. I was, however, particularly minded by some of the comments from Councillor Corkery and some of the comments from Councillor Leonie Oliver that made me review the letter that I'm asking you to approve today. And therefore there is an amendment to that letter which I'm going to ask Anna to circulate. And Anna, if you give me a copy first, I can start reading it while you're giving it out, and that will save a little bit of time. Just to take into consideration that feedback that we have from the meeting. I've looked through the other comments and a lot of them were about the money, understandably, because it is such a big issue, and I felt that that was already fairly well captured. But the bit that I felt was kind of missing was a bit of heart. And I'd written a letter to address the business-like issues, but I felt that we also needed to address the emotional issues, which actually, Mr. McGregor-Sims, you've just opened your deputation with, so I think hopefully you'll approve too. So, members, I'm going to read it out just for anybody that's watching the meeting today so that they know what I'm asking to be added to the letter. And hopefully it will meet with your approval. So the suggested inclusion immediately before the "we look forward to hearing from you" conclusion at the end of the existing letter is as follows. Although not intrinsically part of your criteria for LGR, I do, in closing, want to ensure you know just how much this matters in a human sense to our city. Portsmouth is a place, a clearly understood place. Its history dates back over 800 years. It was forged in an age when defence of these islands was the foremost consideration, and it has played that part ever since and remains the home of the Royal Navy. It has 3 cathedrals, 2 Christian and 1 football at Fratton Park, with some of the most committed fans in the world. It is an increasingly diverse university city, a creative city, and it understands what it is and has a deep sense of community. Diluting all of that by lumping Portsmouth into a larger council, of which we would likely be a minority partner, risks undermining all of this. I'm aware that cities around England are making the government very aware that where you require them to expand to more than twice their current size, that poses a very real risk to their ability to be the engines of growth, which ironically is what you need them to be. Consider this. Someone who was born, lived and worked in Southampton and then moved out to the suburbs to Parkgate will be living in the proposed new unitary area that includes Portsmouth. They get elected and the party grouping they become part of become the administration. They become leader of the council, perhaps never having even visited our city. How would they know the first thing about what makes Portsmouth tick? How would they really understand our communities? Do you really believe this would be the best thing for Portsmouth? And finally, I will welcome a meeting with you to properly discuss this and make Portsmouth's case face to face. So that is the addition that I'm proposing. So when we get to the recommendations today, it will be the letter as published with that inclusion, and then that would be added to the substantive and published. Okay. Before we get into the debate today, because Natalie is not introducing, and because I'm aware that there may be people watching online, with members' indulgence, I want to take you through the two things that we're submitting today. So one is the business case, which has been prepared by the group of 12 councils, and we explained what that was all about on Tuesday, all 500 pages of it. But the really important bit is the letter. So what the letter does is it replaces our signature on the group of 12 submission. We have not signed that proposal. We have drawn attention specifically to the fact that Portsmouth is repeating its request again to be excluded from the LGR process. That is Portsmouth's position. However, we also need to be pragmatic, and that all the smoke signals are that government are just going to go ahead and do this anyway because they can. So if that were to be the case, and us to, in that situation specifically, us never to have expressed a view on what we would support, we will risk being done too, and that is the position, as we heard on Tuesday, that the Isle of Wight very unfortunately now finds itself in, and that is not in the best interest of this city. So very clearly we want to say hands off Portsmouth, but we also want to say if you choose to ignore us, then this is the least worst option, and that's what the letter is all about. So I'm just going to take you briefly through the detail of it. I've talked about viability, and we have real concerns about viability, about the debt that we will inherit from the county. We've pointed out that we are a successful unitary authority, albeit we've got challenges associated with all urban areas in the country. But despite the considerable systemic financial pressures facing all local authorities, Portsmouth remained in a stable financial position. This is a really key point. Southampton are being asked to be part of reorganisation, but we know that they had to apply for exceptional support because they have not been in a financially stable position, and that was originally what we thought the government meant when it talked about impacting unitaries that are co-located within two-tier areas, as Portsmouth and Southampton are. But no, they made it clear that that did include Portsmouth, and it also included the Isle of Wight. So, because of our unitarised position, we have realised the benefits that can be made from collapsing the two-tier system into a unitary council over many years. Those savings, and actually this is a point that we haven't really dwelled on to date, the over time thing is crucial. We have been able to transform, evolve and adapt services. We have been able to work over long periods of time with our partners in the voluntary and community sector to enable us to not lose some of the things that people in this city value the most. What we're being faced with here is a shadow council elected in 2027 having 12 months to find, in all likelihood, whatever the number ends up being, tens of millions of pounds worth of savings. That's not evolution, that's revolution, and for all the wrong reasons. So we haven't really talked about that specifically, but I do think the pace of all of this is a major problem in how this is being driven forward. But it's been made clear to us that we are too small, in inverted commas, without anybody actually saying why we're too small, because we are a viable authority. And I have pointed out to the Minister in letters previously, and again in this one, that his own council, Oldham, which he was previously involved with, has a population not hugely more than Portsmouth, and he wasn't asking that to be part of local government reorganisation, nor is Windsor and Maidenhead, or Kensington and Chelsea, or Solihull, or a whole raft of other unitary councils around the country. Many of them are very similar size or smaller than Portsmouth. We have had, to date, no rational explanation as to why. All these other councils can carry on as they were, but no, Portsmouth's got to be part of local government reorganisation. So we have talked about the threat of that and your future viability, and I've pointed specifically to the currently forecast £281 million deficit, revenue budget deficit, not debt, that Hampshire County Council is forecasting currently for the year 2028-2029. Now, as we heard from Chris Ward, our Director of Finance, on Tuesday, we're not expecting that figure to stay as it is. Inevitably, Hampshire will have to find savings, probably, I think fair to say, in the near future with some exceptional financial support, But as we also heard on Tuesday, I think from Councillor Corkery, that's a one-off use of council reserves and resources, or a selling off the family silver exercise to solve a one-year problem. It's not necessarily getting this into a financially balanced position by 2028, 2029, nor is it addressing the wider issue that all the other councils, including us and Southampton and the Isle of Wight, have to deal with by 2028, 2029, which is our own onward forecast MTFSs. So in other words, for anybody watching, the budget savings we are currently forecast to have to make by that time, which add up in total with the 281 million to 323 million pounds, a vast number. All getting solved in a couple of years? I think highly likely not. So that would leave the Portsmouth and South East Hampshire Unitary Authority proposed bit of this, with a population of 582,000 if the boundary changes were to be accepted, with a forecast revenue budget deficit of £67 million on day one. Less anything that gets saved in the interim period, it ain't going to be £67 million or anywhere remotely close to it. And I've raised the issue many times with Jim McMahon, who has never answered the question. In every one of the letters, which you will find in the appendices to the council report that went in on Tuesday, he keeps talking about council debt. This is not about council debt. Portsmouth has quite a significant level of debt, but it uses it wisely, and that creates income to support council services, which, by the way, will now have to be divvied up across the 3 surrounding boroughs for the benefit of their residents if this were to go ahead, something that I also think is completely unacceptable. And this savings figure, of course, needs to be delivered despite the fact that Portsmouth has taken the 2-tier premium and saved over £120 million now since 2010 through transformation, efficiencies and savings. So that's the budget gap that I keep talking about, and which the government steadfastly refuses to address. So we may be part of a new local authority that goes bankrupt on day one. And if anyone watching or listening is saying it's scaremongering, look at Somerset. Look at what happened to Somerset. On day one, they had a £76 million problem, and they still haven't fixed it. And I've been to Somerset twice within the last year, and I have heard from people who work in the cultural and creative industries there the huge struggles that they've had due to the pressures on council budgets cutting the very things that our residents really care about. The things that matter to them, the things that impact on their lives, the services they take for granted. We should not be being placed without our consent into that position. So I now want to come on to talk about the County Council's Network report, the notorious 2020 report, upon which the government appears to have entirely relied in its rationale for directing all of this mayhem on councils across the country. The PwC report in 2020 talked about the huge amount of savings that could be made by collapsing the 2-tier system. But it's important to look at that report in context. At the time, there was a move towards county-wide unitaries. Indeed, Somerset, prime example, Cornwall a few years before. At that point, it was becoming de rigueur for county areas to unitarise. So the PwC report that was written for the Counties Network was, understandably, because it is the county council's network, intended to show a strong business case for continuing to do this. Because county councils love to consider themselves as the continuing authorities that will just suck up all the districts and boroughs and the smaller unitaries because big is better and they know best. However, having now realised that the government did not want county-wide unitaries because it set an average size for these new councils of 500,000 people, they decided to update their own report and debunk it and actually say, well, there are savings, but only if it really is big. As soon as you start to add multiple councils and you end up with 4, 5, 6, 7, no, there's no savings to be made, it'll all lose money. Because the report was written to support county-wide unitaries. Not because it's true, but because they've taken a set of figures and they have displayed what they wanted to display. So that is where we are, and we may be forced to do this against our will, against the will of the 82% of the people of Portsmouth, and nearly 4,000 of them who responded to a council survey to say, leave Portsmouth alone, hands off, we're not interested. Against all of that, this may go ahead. And therefore, it is essential that if the government do this, despite every effort by this administration, this council, and the people of Portsmouth to do it, we have to express a view, and why? Because otherwise we will be done too, and we cannot allow that to happen. So it's clear that the boundary change request in this situation, option 1, which is now called option 1A, close enough to be local, big enough to stay strong. I hate that title. One of the reasons I didn't sign it is the case for change that we would support. And we believe there is a strong case for that. We've worked extensively with the other councils in Hampshire, 11 of them, to put that together to make the argument that we should not be sucked into what the county council in East Hampshire want, which is 3 mega mainland unitaries, of which we would be the smallest, and therefore subservient to the arguments and whims of the 2 larger councils, and that impacts on devolution as well, and potentially on the voting of that mayoral combined authority. We cannot be left in a disadvantaged position. So that position has a greater potential to drive economic and housing growth, both across the new proposed South Hampshire unitaries, brings together similar communities with strong relationships to the 2 South Coast cities, reflects the geography for Portsmouth and South East Hampshire, the area which we would be part of on the communities of the lower A3 corridor, which is the 3 southern parishes in what is currently East Hampshire District Council. It reflects the existing travel to work network, transport and public service, health and education, acute hospital, etc. across those patterns. And it also creates councils with the more balanced population numbers and council tax bases, and helps to balance out the relatively high deprivation levels which we will inherit as part of this larger council in South East Hampshire, and provides the potential financial stability for a new Portsmouth and South East Hampshire authority, albeit within the context of those massive savings. So that's why I said earlier on, least bad option, not good option. So as such, the Portsmouth City Council preference is the least bad option, and we would go with 1A, and we would formally request that the Secretary of State uses their modification powers under sections 7 and 11 of the Local Government and Public Involvement in Health Act 2007 to modify option 1 so it achieves the outcomes as set out in the modification request, option 1A. All sounds very official. It needs to be. We need to be absolutely clear what we are saying. We have also asked the Minister and the Secretary of State to consider that we back the argument for the Isle of Wight to stay as a separate unit entity. This is so important. Now they have not expressed a view on local government reorganisation. As Jim McMahon, the former Minister, said to me, you don't want Jim from Oldham drawing lines on maps, do you? The answer to that is no, Jim, we didn't, and we don't want your successors doing it either. So the Isle of Wight must stay separate. We also recognise that Hampshire County Council and East Hampshire District Council options are poor in relation to 5 at least of the 6 criteria that government themselves has laid down. And if there was any suggestion to go to the fallback option of the county and East Hampshire, which would put Portsmouth and Southampton together in one council, I can only imagine the fire and brimstone that would emerge from that. So that must never be considered by this government, and we do believe there's a strong case for our friends in Basingstoke and Dean, Rushmore and Hart to be brought together into one unitary council because they have a distinct economic identity based around their proximity to the M4 and M3, which is also why it's utterly mad to propose the Hampshire proposal, which puts them in with Winchester and East Hampshire, which do not look to the M4 and the M3 in the same way. So, in conclusion, everyone, least possible damage is option 1A, but our message, loud and clear, to the new Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government is hands off Portsmouth. Okay, who's next up? Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, thank you, Leader. And as I said in the council meeting the other day, many thanks to the Cabinet and all the members who've devoted many hours to try and put Portsmouth into the best possible position, and the officers, I beg your pardon, not least the Chief Executive. I was surprised it's not gone grey after all of this, but it's been a huge amount of work for all of them, all times of day and all times of night. And let's just really talk about staff, Chief Executives. You just can't deliver the sorts of services that Portsmouth and her residents enjoy without really good staff. And as you said earlier on, Leader, Portsmouth has done all the cuts that it can possibly do. It can't really do much more. And those really good officers have helped us to deliver the sorts of things that you talked about. This very building, not so long ago, when it was run by the council with one of its contractors, was a dead loss. It really was. And then I remember sitting down with Mr. Bailey, and him and I came up with the idea of creating a Portsmouth Cultural Trust. And it's been an enormous success. And it is born, you know, it has reduced the subsidy that Portsmouth council taxpayers have had to use. You know, millions and millions of pounds over the last, I think it's about 8, 9, 10 years. An enormous saving that could now be spent on other things, or at least go towards our savings. And the shows are much better. The food is better. The wine is definitely better. There's no question about that. And it's more popular than ever before. And that's just one example of the sorts of things that this administration has achieved by being progressive, by hiring good quality officers. And when you hire good quality officers, despite what anybody says on the internet, you get better services and the sorts of services that people want to see, and they are worth the money. So for these ministers up in London who are going to just delete centuries of history in Portsmouth at the stroke of a red pen, they don't give a monkeys about us or what we want. All they want to do is tidy up a map. That's all they want to do. We go through all these different discussions about who's going to go in where and what's going to happen and what the savings might be. We heard from the Chief Executive at the council meeting, the savings will be something like £24 million. Well, that's small beer, quite frankly, in the scale of things. It's really a small amount of money, and we could probably do that ourselves over the years again. So it's all a load of baloney, quite frankly. If you ask me, there's two things involved. The Labour government have got to prove that they're changing things. And for them, one of the easiest things to take pot shots at is local government. It's the same with all governments over the 30-odd years I've been doing this, just under 30 years. They take pot shots at local government. So they're going to change local government, and they say they're going to make it better. They're not going to make it better. If this goes through, Leader and Cabinet, officers, Chief Executive, if this goes through, democracy or decision-making, whatever you want to call it, will become remote, much more remote. There will be fewer officers to support the councillors making those decisions. Democracy will become diminished. And that is going to happen. That part of it will most definitely happen. I've had the best 30-odd years of democracy and representation for people. I can call up an officer, I can get things done, I can go to the planning team, I can go to the legal team, and so in this new mega authority, 99 councillors are going to keep these fewer officers a darn sight busier than we do now. And it's going to become a total and utter mess. And people won't like it. But in Portsmouth, like I said in the council meeting, and I'm sorry to go on, people are not fools. You know, we have some of these extremists who just want to see the end of the Lib Dems or the end of Labour or the end of this or that, and those officers taught a lesson. You know, they're all completely balmy, you know. Sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees. You can't see the good around you. Look at all the changes that we have made along the seafront. Look what we did to the hot walls. A stinking mess at one time. And now look at it. You know, all those new businesses in there. And people like it. People really do like it. They like the changes along the seafront. They like the fact that we rolled up all those different contracts that we had to safeguard people along in the sea, and gave that contract to the RNLI. They like the new eateries all along the seafront. And they got to look at all the sports stuff that we've done over the years, working with British tennis and British gymnastics and a whole bunch of other stuff. The ones I worry about the most, really, are those community centres. Just about surviving. The play parks in Buckland, run by volunteers, by Maureen Mapleston and Angela Rock, and up in Stanshaw. You know, they're on a knife edge all of the time, and these volunteers work really hard to keep these places going. And do you know what? Our officers work really hard with them to keep the maintenance up. And that maintenance is really, really key to the buildings continuing to serve the local population. And what will happen is, if we're in debt, if this new council, if it goes through, and I sincerely hope it doesn't, if it goes through, those places, not just those ones I've mentioned, but right across the city, if there's a 30, 40, 50 deficit, or whatever it's going to be, or whatever the financial hardship is for the council, those maintenance budgets, and the same for our housing, will all come under pressure straight away. You know, because here, because we look after the money so well, and managing so well, as you say, by working with the third sector, working with volunteers, all of that's going to go down the Swanee. It really will. And the pressure on that maintenance budget, I fear, might see community centres closing, because they will have to raise even more money to keep themselves going. And if they need a new roof, now that's a really big budget item. And I know Stanshaw and Tipner Community Centre need a new roof. But where is the money going to come from if the new council is already millions of pounds in trouble? And where will all the things that all these other places want, or we want to invest in the adventure playgrounds? How will we keep up the investment in them? We've got a lot of them. We have a lot of play parks. We have more swimming pools and more opening. Will they stay open? I wonder, you know, if there's a real big problem, will assets be sold off to finance problems elsewhere? Will this new council, for example, if it's grabbed by Reform or the Conservatives, sit down and say, oh, we'll sell off the port? They'd be mad to do it, but they could. They could sell the port off and easily get rid of all the debts that that particular council has. But we've been wise. We weren't tempted to sell the port off because it brings in about £10 million every year. And that £10 million is utilised to go towards Buckland Community Centre to help maintain it. I know the housing budget does a lot, but it enables a lot of other things to be done around the city. And the money that we bring in through our solar panels by using our initiative and by being progressive and by buying up the North Harbour, all these other buildings that we brought in a few years back, something like £20 million altogether. Well, that's got to be redistributed now to Gosport, Fareham and Havant. They don't have the sorts of advantages that we have here. So it boils down. You talked about a debt. It's not about our debt. It is about sorting out the finances of Hampshire, because the government have made it very clear that they're not going to do it. It's what it boils down to. They want to sort out the financial problems that Hampshire has got, and Southampton. And so Portsmouth people are going to be made to pay that. They really are. because we don't have that financial problem here, as Ms McGregor-Sims alluded to earlier on. And I can't really beat Leonie's, Councillor Meehan's speech the other day, which was sublime. You know, it's really well delivered, and she did it much better than ever I could. But it's really sad. You know, you see the Freedom of the City up there. You talk about Portsmouth. You see the Star and Crescent. All of this will become some new sort of, I don't know what they're going to call it. Greater Portsmouth. Well, Havant won't like that. Fareham won't like that. And Gosport won't like that. What on earth is it going to be called? The Snap Council? I don't know. But it's so wrong. And what's going on is not necessary. And where the bloody hell are those two MPs? Have they stood up for Portsmouth? You haven't heard a dicky about those two. Utterly elusive on this particular matter. Where are they? We sent them to Whitehall, to Parliament, to represent our city, to put our city first. Where are they on this matter? They spend most of their time council bashing, quite frankly. That's what they spend most of their time doing, bashing the council, instead of really getting on with a serious issue like this. Where is their mettle? Where is their resolve? Why can't they stand up to their ministers? Why can't they stand up and act in the best interest of Portsmouth? I am scathing about them. They're getting away with it by just being quiet and hoping that nobody notices they've got their heads buried in the sand. So they have been the worst in this, I believe. We have done everything we possibly can, including our Hands Off Portsmouth campaign. So you can tell I'm really hacked off about it. Yeah, and I think 82% of the population out there are hacked off about it. They don't want it. And it's not real at the moment. We're just talking about it. But boy, when it comes in, all these Labour ones who normally sit here, they're going to suffer and pay, because they're going to make Portsmouth people pay. But I don't want to get ultra-political, but I hope they do pay for it. Thank you, Leader, and hands off Portsmouth. Sorry to have gone on so long.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt.
30 years worth.
Councillor Winnington.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you going after Councillor Hunt with his passionate speech there, which really does get to a lot of the cruxes of the issue. I want to start by bringing up a bit the Leader brought out at the beginning about why we've been picked on. Yeah. So why are we being picked on? We're being picked on because it's an accident of geography. Accident of we have no control over this. It's something that just happens to be. We happen to be in a ceremonial county with an area that has two-tier. It's as simple as that. That is the simple thing. If we weren't in a county that didn't have a two-tier local government next to it as part of that county, we wouldn't be involved in this. And we know this because York isn't involved in this. York's not that much bigger than Portsmouth. They're not involved, because the other part of Yorkshire, of North Yorkshire, is already a unitary authority. That's not going well, by the way. Hull, a little bit bigger than Portsmouth, about the same sort of size as Southampton. They're next to East Yorkshire. They're in the county of East Yorkshire. East Yorkshire is also already a single unitary authority, and they're not involved. And then you've got, as Councillor Pitt mentioned earlier, you have the Berkshire authorities. Berkshire has no county council and hasn't had since the mid-90s because all of their districts were made into unitary authorities. But none of them have to be involved in this. Only one is saying they want to be involved in this. And that's because they want to link in with bits that are in Oxfordshire, which were taken away from them back in the 1970s when there used to be one authority. And you could go on and on. Swindon, let's think of some others. There's one or two others anyway. But the point is that it's an accident of geography. And as the Leader says, there has been no justification why those authorities, which are similar sizes or smaller in the cases of all the Berkshire ones, are not involved. Why don't they have to do it? And we know that includes Slough, who were one of the first councils in the country to go effectively bankrupt because of mismanagement over the years, but also because of the rising cost that every single upper tier local authority is facing. So let's just take the people involved in these decisions to go forward with this. Let's just take as an example of the authorities where their MPs fall. And let's see if any of them fits the 500,000 to have a local that says, they've said that if you're below that, that is the target number and you should have. So let's take the new the new minister in charge of housing, communities, local government, Steve Reid. So Steve Reid is an MP for a seat which covers Croydon and Lambeth. So Lambeth has a population in 2022 of 316,812. Doesn't fit the 500,000, they should be part of LGR. Croydon is the nearest one in the whole of London, has a population of 392,224. The interesting thing is, Croydon is the biggest London borough, but it is also the most bust London borough. It is again the first London borough that went effectively bankrupt. So bigger doesn't work, does it? It's not a paragon of virtue. It doesn't mean that things are all going to be rosy. It doesn't give the financial resilience that the government says this is what this is all about, underlying. It's nonsense. It's just completely random. Let's take the new minister, who's Alison McGovern, who until recently was MP for my home seat, and actually I grew up on the same estate with her, and actually she was a year below me at school. But her borough is Wirral, my home borough, in Merseyside, and that borough has a population of 322,453. Why aren't they involved in this? Well, again, it's inexplicable. It's not 500,000, so therefore they should be doing that. Let's try again though, because Alison McGovern was also a councillor back in when she was in her 20s in London, in Southwark. So let's see again, shall we? Southwark, population 311,913. They should be up for local government reorganisation. But it's silence again. Oh, but the Prime Minister, surely the Prime Minister must be from a borough which is big enough to not have to be reorganised. Well, I'll tell you what, out of all of those, he has the smallest population, which is almost exactly the same population as Portsmouth. So in Camden, there's a population of 218,049. That's very close to our 214,000 estimate that we have at the moment. Indeed, the only one who's involved in all this, who has any argument whatsoever that her local authority shouldn't be involved in reorganisation, is Rachel Reeves, which Leeds has a massive, massive population of 822,483. Now, if you've been to Leeds, you'll know that actually Leeds takes in a huge amount of countryside, including places like Otley and Wetherby, who quite frankly hate being in a local authority with Leeds and really would prefer to have absolutely nothing to do with them whatsoever. And quite frankly, especially Wetherby, would far prefer to be in North Yorkshire in a unitary with, or in a council with people up there. But that is a massive population, and you will get, as has been mentioned by Councillor Hunt and the leader, you will get things where people are remote from decision making and decisions are made from outside your local area. So that's just an example of this is completely capricious. There is no plan behind this at all, no serious plan. It is just laziness at the heart of government. It's not entirely clear why they're doing this only in certain areas and not others, but it is clear that they should be doing this in a much wider context if they're serious about actually we think single tier government is the right thing to do. Because the interesting thing about those numbers, if you really think about it, is I don't have an issue with that because they're all relevant. I mean, Leeds I think is too big, but they're all relevant for their areas. They actually probably fit in. Now, a lot of London boroughs could probably merge because, quite frankly, you go from one to another and you don't notice. But it is a case of, because they don't have that community bits and pieces there. But the point is that you have these, that it's reflective. I'm going to use Norway as a bit of an example of how this can go horribly wrong. So Norway, if you know your liberal history, has always been an important thing for us because, of course, Home Rule for Ireland came from William Gladstone's trip to Norway, because he saw how Home Rule worked there when they were part of the kingdom with Sweden. So Norway's always a good place to go for good examples, including good examples when things go wrong. So in 2020, Norway merged loads of their counties. So their counties are effectively, they have municipalities underneath, but they're almost more like, a lot of them are more like parish councils. But effectively, they're the bit where a lot of the decision making is made in local government terms. Now, Norway is a long, thin country, very indented coastline. Very dense coastline, that might sound familiar, doesn't it? And so they merged they went from 17 counties to 11. They merged loads of counties, and there was absolute uproar and mayhem. The interesting thing about the counties was that, of course, they were all different sizes. And part of the point of doing this was to try and harmonise the sizes between the counties. They say, oh, those ones up north, right up in the Arctic Circle, they're too small, they need to merge. Absolute mayhem. 3 years later, they backpedaled, and they went from back from 11 to 15, so a couple of them did stay together. But they had to backpedal because it didn't work. What they were trying to do didn't work. So you now have counties in Norway, again, which go from Oslo itself, which is 700,000, right down to Finnmark, which is right at the very, very north of Norway, which had 75,000. It's good enough for them. Why shouldn't it be good enough for us? Why do we have to have this one-size-fits-all rather than looking about what matters to the communities? And that's where the crux of the issue comes that the leader mentioned of the addition to the letter that he's putting in. Because Councillor Oliver made an absolutely brilliant speech about, I've been talking to local residents and what does it mean to this? And it does matter to people because I have to say, when I've been out knocking on doors, when I've been out speaking to people, and we've been doing stalls on this, the more people understand that this is happening, the more they think it's mad, the more they think it is the wrong thing to do, the more they are mortified about it. I've lived in two places in my life which have a massive sense of itself. Liverpool when I was a student and Portsmouth. Liverpool's not involved with this. Liverpool's big enough. It actually does fit their criteria. Didn't always, though. When I was a student, they were under 500,000 because the population had gone, as a lot of urban cities did in that time. Actually, like Portsmouth did. Portsmouth's population went down back in the mid and late 20th century. And it's going back up again now. But sense of self, you would never say to them, oh, you've got to merge with all those areas around it, including the countryside, and go into West Lancashire. Wouldn't say that, would you? But because Liverpool's scale's bigger, that would be the logical thing to do, because that's what you're asking Portsmouth to do. The fact that Portsmouth, as a geographic area, because of geography, hello, most of the cities in Ireland, and we've got Portsdown Hill, which is our natural boundary, apart from our little tiny bit over the hill, and we love those people as well. But that's the point, is that it fits our geography and it fits our sense of place. And that should be your first principles for having local authorities. It shouldn't be lines on a map. So Jim McMahon was quite right. You don't want me drawing lines on a map. But quite frankly, Jim, he's now out of government, but quite frankly, Jim, if you were looking to draw lines on the map, you probably pretty much have Portsmouth, if you had like a proper geography. That is a question. But you'd actually draw Portsmouth pretty much as it is, because you said, well, this makes sense, doesn't it? Because to get to anywhere, you have to go over water for the majority of the city. So all of these things come together as a reason not to do it for senses of identity reasons. But the biggest thing is about the money. Because this is the reason we're being told this is being done to make things more efficient, make things more resilient, make things better and better local government. I've put on record before, I have no issue with all unitarisation. In fact, I've always thought two-tier didn't work at all, and that goes from my later childhood, growing up in Hastings, which is in East Sussex, where there's two-tier, and quite frankly, that has never worked. And that saw the county council doing things in the local borough where they had no councillors at all, no county councillors at all, because they knew they could get away with it scot-free, because they just could. And actually, that goes for any council that's too big. You can pick on areas where you think there's no political risk for us because we haven't got any councillors there. Something that could happen if we were forced into a mega council. If, say, the ruling authority had no councillors in Gosport, for example, they might think, well, we can do what we like in Gosport because we haven't got any comeback on this. That wouldn't be right, but it does happen when councils are too big and they don't cover sensible areas. So we've been told that this is all going to be make things better, but we know that isn't true. We know that isn't true because of the county council's own numbers, not something that we plucked out the air or the people who have helped us put together a report have plucked out the air. Their own numbers and their own budgeting. They've shown how much of a deficit they've got, which will have to be inherited by any new unitary authorities around the country, including one if we're shotgunned into a South East Hampshire unitary. And let's get to that name thing, because Councillor Hunt is quite right. What are we going to call ourselves? And what logo are we going to have? I'll wear this today, our lovely Star and Crescent logo, Portsmouth, given to me by the Lord Mayor a few years ago. I wear that because I'm a Portsmouth City Councillor. What logo am I going to have if I'm a South East Hampshire or Eastern Solent Councillor? I don't know. Like BCP, but Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole for that, but they're known by their initials because there's no sense of place there and everyone there hates it. They never want to be merged together. It's been, again, another disaster. All the worst aspects of those authorities and few of the best ones actually came into it. And that's what happens when you have a race to the bottom. And finally, and it's repeating what was mentioned on Tuesday, it was about, it's not as if we haven't been here before. It's not local authorities, it was the NHS. We had a clinical commissioning group under the old system of organising the NHS. Whatever you think of CCGs, we had one that was coterminous with Portsmouth. That was one that had little debt, it managed its money, and we worked very closely with it, and we actually shared a chief officer with them, who was also our head of adult social care at the council. We resisted going into a bigger CCG when all the other CCGs in Hampshire and Isle of Wight merged. We said no. We got huge amounts of pressure to do that, and we said no. And in the end, we weren't forced to go into it. However, when they changed the way that the NHS was done into integrated care boards, into integrated care systems, we were forced into it. And when that integrated care system came into being, it had a deficit of £130 million on day one. None of that debt was from Portsmouth. It was all from the rest of Hampshire Isle of Wight. So people in Portsmouth had to pay the price for other areas not managing their finances properly, not taking the decisions they should have done to get the most out of their money, be efficient, and work together with their local authority. We worked together with the NHS. We continue to work together with the NHS after nearly 20 years of really close working. But this is the real crux of it. is we've seen it happen before. They had to make 30% staffing reductions across the whole of Hampshire Isle of Wight, including Portsmouth. Just because of that. Other places around the country didn't have to because the preceding CCGs were run more like our CCG was and not with massive amounts of debt and deficit. So putting a burden onto this city of paying off the deficits that other places have made, whether through their fault or not, is just completely unacceptable. So the government should go back, put their head between their legs and think, this isn't the right thing to do. Not just here, but everywhere. But at the very, very least, they should leave us be like they leave Hull be, all those local authorities I've already mentioned be, and loads of others around the country that are already unitaries, urban unitaries, that do not fit their criteria. So I say, finally, for the last time, before we put this submission in, hands off Portsmouth.
Thanks, Councillor Winnington. Just before I go on to the next member of the Cabinet, I just wanted to refer back to a couple of things that you just said there, because I think the CCG issue is a very, very good parallel for what we're looking at here. And I remember just how much real sadness there was when we lost our CCG, and how that coterminous working and the efficiencies that we made and the benefits to the residents of those services being delivered in the way they were immediately compromised by the new system that was brought in, which is still not working now. I mean, I remember when I became leader and then Natalie became chief exec in the September, we tried, well, it took us about 6 months, I think, to get a meeting with the chief executive of the ICB, and we said we were prepared to wait to have the meeting in person. And on the day we were supposed to be having said meeting, we got a message late morning to say, oh, we can't come in person now, so we're going to have to do this meeting on Teams. So we've still never met them in person, and I'm in my 3rd year now as leader of the council. So if that's the distant and remote accountability we can expect going forward from this debacle, then I'm not looking forward to it. There is one thing I did miss earlier on that I did want to come back to, and that's the point about the government lied. And I don't say that lightly, and I'm very aware that the monitoring officer's here, but the government lied to us. They told us right at the beginning of all of this, after the white paper was published in December last year, that if we were part of the devolution priority programme, different and separate issue, we would have longer to sort ourselves out for LGR, because we were caught by LGR like everybody else, but if we were part of the devolution priority programme, we'd get longer because we'd be doing 2 things at the same time. So obviously that was going to take longer to do, so that's what we were advised. And what happened? Changed their mind. They didn't ask us, they didn't even inform us actually. We found out in a briefing, oh no, they've changed the date. So now we've had to do it faster than everyone else on the argument that, oh, well, we decided because of devolution you're doing all this work anyway, so you just get it done. And we haven't really had a proper explanation of that either. So how do you trust liars? And that is a really big problem for me. And I was at a briefing the first week this Labour government, maybe the second week this Labour government came into power. And it was Angela Rayner, the then Secretary of State, the Deputy Prime Minister, who called all council leaders across the country, some of them up in Westminster and some of us joined online, to a meeting to promise a reset with local government, a new relationship, that they'd listen, that there would be a positive relationship with local government. Really? Is this what a positive new relationship with local government means? No, what she meant was, I'm going to abolish most of you, so you won't be able to not get on with me anymore because you won't exist. So not only were we lied to by the then Deputy Prime Minister about that new relationship, because I have seen absolutely nothing to say that this is any different than it was under the previous government, where we get diktats sent through in letters, some of which don't even make any sense. They're not quite as mad as some of the ones of the previous government, I have to say, but they are pretty mad. And also that this the date change without any consultation, leaving us in a really difficult position. So the reason I wanted to refer to that is I do want to say a huge thank you to Paddy, Chris and Natalie, because the amount of work that this has entailed to do at this pace has been absolutely huge. There are a whole bunch of other officers at Portsmouth City Council as well who have had to do a huge amount of work on this, but those three officers in particular have been an immense support to me during the huge frustrations that I've had to go through. On occasions, well, many occasions, we've had to jump in cars and go over to Winchester and Southampton and other places to have endless meetings on all of this. The summer has been a very, very busy time, and to get to where we've got to, I think is it is the best place we can get to. It's not where we want to be, but it is the least worst position. And I also want to pay tribute to my local government colleagues across Hampshire, none of whom asked for this, but all of whom have maintained good relationships and a sense of humour throughout, which, believe me, has been necessary, including, despite the fact we have a fundamental difference of opinion on what we want the outcome of LGR to be, Leader of the County Council, who has parked that with the rest of us very firmly in the corner and treated devolution as a separate issue, and we've working very well and effectively towards that. Okay, that was me coming in so that you could all break focus for 2 minutes. Who's next? Darren.
Thanks, Steve. I also want to add my thanks to you and to everyone else for navigating this nightmare. I know it's removed probably most of the hair that anyone has got left with regards to this, but it sadly needed that level of attention to detail in order to try and get to something approaching something. Aside from the cold fury we all have at this plan to ruin our city, the main word I have for this nightmare is waste. A waste of time. For officers and councillors spending endless meetings and endless hours and endless charts on detailed plans and negotiations, time that could have been spent making this city better. A waste for Portsmouth residents and staff who, as Lee Hunt said earlier, now fear for the future, often their futures, when they should be working on making that future as bright as possible. And strangely, a waste for this Labour government. Last July, it was elected to be a stable contrast to the Tory mayhem, remember that? And that was music to the ears of, frankly, all councils, regardless of party. What you said about the reset went down very well. Labour appeared to want to fix the wobbly foundations that hold councils and the people they serve back. Getting power out of Whitehall and into communities, fair council funding, fixing social care, finally fixing council tax and business rates. Things that allow councils to do what's best for their areas without having both hands tied behind their back. Instead, they've wanted everyone to waste their time saying you must do this and we want to demolish your house and put a block of flats in their place. Now that's many, many things, but it ain't stable. And the more we look at what it means to our city, the more we say to Labour, hands off Portsmouth. As you said, Leader, that's not linked to the two-tier system. Unitarisation has worked for us. Did it in 1997, best thing we did. But our decision now is what it was back in 1997. Will this change make our city and its services better? The answer is no. The report, the business case, talks of the savings from the merger. Yet Portsmouth's share of it will be a pittance, because we made the big savings when we left Hampshire. Then, as people have said, there's the budget deficit. Left alone, that's in the low millions. Tough, but manageable. In Labour's shotgun wedding, it's tens of millions every year as we inherit Hampshire's out-of-control deficit. The county says that will come down. But government has already said no to its calls for a bailout and extra council tax. We cannot assume that that will change. There is a realistic chance of whoever is left in the new authority having to provide service cuts, and as Councillor Hunt identified earlier, there'll be Labour's cuts, whoever is in charge. As I've said in both public and in private, this is Manchester United before the Glazers took over. And look what happened to them with their success rate since that happened, I tell you. So the best thing's to stay out. But too many people have said that won't happen for us to ignore it. Doing nothing's easy for places like Gosport, which is going anyway. Less so for us. That's why we will fulfil the legal requirement to express the least worst plan B. Given the Isle of Wight's decision last week, as you said earlier on, Steve, not to stay independent, music to the ears of government, I must say, that's even more important. So should Labour fire the gun at our head, option 1A means life support rather than instant death, but it is just life support. Tuesday's council meeting was instructive, I have to say. PIP and Reform had no view on the biggest matter facing this city in decades. Their silence in defence of this great city was deafening. Labour backed their government's shotgun wedding, as expected. I respect that position, even though I don't agree with it. The Tories raised, though, interesting issues that trouble me, and interesting issues we don't necessarily have to worry now, but if we are forced into this shotgun wedding, we will have to worry about later. How do we avoid having a two-tier council by the back door? How will the communities we care about take decisions on the things that matter to them when power is further away? Labour's approach appears to be neighbourhood committees. Now, I'll tell you a story. When I was in my previous authority, it was too big. Lambeth was too big. There were too many committees, Clapham, Brixton, Streatham, Waterloo, Kennington, all these sorts of places. So I championed a concept called area committees. Devolved power down to local areas because they knew more about how their communities run than people in the town hall. Chief opponent of that, one Mr. Stephen Reid, and the Lambeth Labour, bless them. I didn't like their position, but I respected their position, and they actually did quite a good job when they actually chaired their area committee. And indeed, the Cooperative Council, which is the brainchild of the Secretary of State alongside the Cooperative Councils movement, came out in large part out of a reaction to, an opposition to, those neighbourhood committees I championed, he opposed, and he might have to help set up as part of this process. I didn't want to be proved right, it's only taken 23 years. But we shouldn't have to do that because it should be around natural communities. And that's what's been missing in this whole thing. The human aspect, the communities aspect, it's there in the excellent additions that the leader has added to this letter. It's there in everything Leonie said on Tuesday. Those are people in my ward. Those are people in her ward. And they've got more common sense than most people. And they look at it in terms of how it will affect me. Will it make my life better? And they are the most important people in all this, not lines on a map. Now, people ask us, will they leave us alone? My view is that with the old guard in government, I would have said that was unlikely. But having been on calls with various Labour leaders across the country, they are, and these are supporters of reorganisation, they are concerned that the new broom, the new guard, the guard with the hottest possible line to number 10, will change things and will scrap things. That's why I was happy to go along with a group of Labour councillors to a meeting with the Secretary of State. I haven't had the invite yet. I feel humiliated, but anyway, to talk to him about it. And I said one word to them, great, because it means it's what is a bad deal for Portsmouth doesn't happen. But it is interesting because the new guard has got one focus. Their driving focus now and for the last 2 decades is devolution. I don't agree, I've never agreed with their fetish for mayors and commissioners, but their central argument, giving natural communities like Portsmouth more control over what happens, gives them the hope that so many have lacked for so long. It is transformative. It is really transformative. And it remains as true now as it was more than 20 years ago. And if it sounds like a Liberal Democrat fringe meeting, that's because it is. Because that's what we as a party believe. Instead, we've got the dog's breakfast of reorganisation. It doesn't do that. It doesn't give communities control. It takes it away. And that means that, but it means that fear that the old guard may change gives us a chance to make one final push. That's why, Leader, I'm delighted that you fancy having a chat with the Secretary of State. And I know I and the rest of the Cabinet would be more than happy to help you in any capacity that you choose. It may not work, but we have to keep trying to persuade Labour to put the gun away and keep their hands off us. That's the best thing for this council, and most importantly of all, is the best thing for this city. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Darren. Who's next? Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to touch on the human element of all of this again, especially after hearing Councillor Oliver's excellent speech on Tuesday and seeing this fantastic addition to add on to your letter going to the Secretary of State. As councillors, we are always out and about in our communities, whether it's at local events, knocking on doors, attending meetings, and just out and about doing our daily thing. We know very quickly when there is an issue. We certainly hear about it from our residents. People will approach us, discuss, and very much make their feelings clear. The biggest issue in my time so far as a councillor was the development at St James Hospital. I can now say for certain that with LGR coming forwards, this by far beats the amount of communication I've had so far about any other issue. There is a common theme. People are very unhappy about, well, actually, I was going to say unhappy. In fact, that's not the right word. They are downright furious about this, absolutely furious. We know, and we all are people from Portsmouth, we are a proud people. When push comes to shove, we do come together, regardless of age, political backgrounds, leanings. And I can tell you that people do not want to be grouped with the other councils that have been proposed. That is why we had such a strong opinion from that survey that Councillor Hunt mentioned. And the sadness also is clear from residents. The fact that our two MPs, the two people who go to Parliament to represent us, have not done their job. They've not stood up for this grand city. It's provided another layer of anger and disappointment for our residents, and it's something that should not have happened. However, you know, they will be the ones to answer to their constituents when it comes to the ballot box, and I fear that for them, well, actually, I don't fear for them, they will have to answer that, and that's down to them at the end of the day. I have also made sure to talk to other councillors like Cabinet members have, and my counterparts, not just in Portsmouth or Hampshire, but across the country. And I can tell you, and also these councillors from literally every party, I've made sure to get a general opinion when I'm talking to people. And I can confirm, and I've spoken to quite a few now, none of them at all have said this is a good idea whatsoever. They also see the huge difficulties that we see. They see the problems this is going to present as well. And they are in the same position as us. They don't want this to happen. And that is from literally every political party, even from the party that runs this government. So surely that says something. I do want to take the opportunity, like others have, to thank Natalie, Chris, Paddy and all our other officers, as well as Steve, who have spent stupidly significant amounts of time dealing with this, frequently having to deal with this government imposing absolutely ridiculously short timescales to hit deadlines, and often over public holidays when they should actually be off enjoying well-deserved time with their family and friends, but having to sort this absolute mess out, it's been ridiculous. The ever-changing lines in the sand, the lack of transparency, lack of clarity, lack of response, and let's be honest, the actual lack of sensible thinking from this government is absolutely outstanding. We have fantastic officers at this council who have jobs to do, whether it's business as usual or dealing with the absolutely fantastic extra things we provide that are not statutory. We've got amazing community wardens, libraries, and the projects we do across the city that bring in income into the city, which means we don't have to cut services like other councils have had to do across the country. I hate to think how much time, money and resource have put into this whole exercise and what we have therefore had to give up to do this, and we don't want to do it in the first place. And it actually makes me physically ill thinking of that happening across the country with all those other councils having to jump through the same hoops, being forced to doing this as well. The time, energy and resource and money that has been spent and used on something that is so stupid. So therefore, you know, it's an absolute waste. I do understand the anger from the Cabinet, because I feel it, the anger from this administration, the anger of other councillors from this council and across the country, but also the anger from our residents as well. We didn't ask for this, and we don't want it. Does anyone remember this in the Labour manifesto? I don't remember seeing it, unless I flipped a page and missed it. I will leave you with just 6 words. The first 3 words were uttered to me by a resident the other day, and they were, how dare they? How dare they? And then my 3 words to finish off, which I absolutely agree with, and which has been mentioned a number of times, is hands off Portsmouth. Hands off Portsmouth. Leave us alone. We don't want this. We're doing exceptionally well. Leave us alone. Thank you.
Very much, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Atwell, please.
Firstly, I want to take this opportunity to extend a sincere thanks to all those who have contributed to the enormous amount of work undertaken over these past 9 months since local government reorganisation was unexpectedly dropped on us. Like you, Councillor Barrett, I didn't see it in the manifesto. If the intention behind this poorly thought through idea is to deliver efficiencies, cost saving and streamlined governance, then I think LGR is another example of this government looking for love in all the wrong places. The reality on the ground across my portfolio, corporate services, etc., is and will be complex and disruptive. If the government gets its way and Portsmouth City Council ceases to exist, I know, as do officers working in services like HR, finance, legal and IT, that they will be among the first to be restructured in the new authority. And this matters because it is entirely possible that between now and vesting day, there will be a loss of institutional knowledge here at Portsmouth City Council, as experienced people leave due to the uncertainty LGR is causing. The result, skills gaps, slower response times for our residents, and an increased likelihood of critical errors. It's also worth highlighting that IT integration is rarely seamless. Merging different systems under tight deadlines can cause major delays, data incompatibility, and serious cyber security vulnerabilities. What is supposed to improve efficiencies, I still have the scars from the integration of payroll systems at the Home Office that resulted in many thousands of people not getting paid. The good intentions of these things often end up causing more in terms of time and money. We must not overlook the cultural disruption of LGR at PCC as well. And if we are forced into a shotgun marriage, it will create a period of limbo where roles are unclear, morale drops and productivity suffers. It's deeply unpalatable to require our excellent officers to manage this uncertainty while also expecting them to make happen our political priorities and keep the lights on, delivering services to residents who quite rightly expect uninterrupted support. Let's also be honest about cost. Savings rarely materialise in the short term. How a new authority will deliver the quality of services we deliver here at Portsmouth City Council across an expanded geography with more complex governance arrangements and increased service demands, all with fewer resources, is beyond me. Understanding that this rabbit out of a hat trick and witnessing its profoundly negative impact was the reason for my own departure from the civil service a decade ago. I've been here before. As councils grow larger and administrative processes become more centralised, more distant and less tailored to local needs, the very ethos of local government is undermined. LGR will weaken the foundations on which all local services depend. And so our message to government must echo that of our residents. Hands off Portsmouth.
Thank you, Councillor Atwell. Councillor Mason.
I spent 40 years of my life lecturing and writing about regional economic development. And the one thing I learned, and I learned the hard way, I think, is that not all places the same, and what is rational and efficient in one place will not work in another. Our government hasn't realised this. It is trying to impose a particular framework on the whole of the country. What works in Northumberland will not work in the West Midlands. What works in the West Midlands will not work here. We have a geography in this country. We have a variety in this country. And if you look at the South Coast, the area where we are, it is made up of a lot of little places, on many not so little places, all of which are proud of their own history. They have a distinct economy, and they integrate together in different ways. We have been very good in this city over the years at integrating some of our services with other local authorities. I saw a very good case, we have a good case earlier today with the Building Control Partnership. It makes sense. Equally making sense, I was at the Coastal Partners this morning where we had the first meeting incorporating Chichester. It has to work. It has to work across boundaries because the Chichester Harbour is partly in Hampshire and partly in West Sussex, which of course will be in two quite different local authorities when this goes through. And will we be able to work together? I do not know. But what I do know is that the character of Portsmouth, this city which I came to 50 years ago thinking I'd stay for a year, I've learnt about its character. It is willing to work with people, but it is determined to maintain its own identity. And whatever local authority arrangements are forced upon us because they fit somewhere else in the country, the people of Portsmouth will still be the people of Portsmouth, and they will still demand that they govern their own destiny. And thus, I think we have to argue at 6:25, hands off Portsmouth. Thank you.
Councillor Mason, Councillor Kendall.
Thank you, Leader. Frankly, like my residents, I am angry. This is another badly thought out plan by a Labour government in faraway Westminster that clearly does not understand Portsmouth, nor believe in local government, nor frankly in local democracy. No one I speak to in Portsmouth wants it. It threatens to undermine well-run Portsmouth's historic separate identity and will certainly leave Portsmouth residents facing higher council taxes and massive cuts to discretionary items like libraries, community wardens and supported bus routes that Portsmouth enjoys but our neighbours do not. So I stand with the 82% of Portsmouth residents who recently said no to a shotgun marriage of well-run Portsmouth with parts of near-bankrupt Hampshire when asked by this council. I have been so proud to tell people that I am a councillor in the historic city of Portsmouth. Will I feel the same about some as yet unnamed administrative region of South East Hampshire? I doubt it. But let's be practical for a moment, because we are councillors and about doing the best for the city. Will I be able to understand the new area as well? As Cabinet Member for Transport, I need to know my patch. At the moment, I know every part of this city. Will I be able to say the same if we double in population and quadruple in area? I doubt it. This plan has the smell of low-calibre management consultants who do not really understand what they are talking about, but have been told what answers they should provide the boss. A bigger local authority will not necessarily deliver better, more responsive local government. And the government have provided no real evidence to explain why it would. My experience is that big is not necessarily better, and the Institute for Government agrees. They found that there was no evidence that size matters. High-speed train, HS2, anyone? What matters is the quality of leadership and a natural sense of community, something Portsmouth has in spades. The best option is clear. Scrap LGR, which is already sucking up time and taking away resources from delivering from Portsmouth. However, if the government persists with this poorly thought through plan, not mentioned in Labour's manifesto and being forced upon us with no local vote, then as this city's councillors, we must do our duty and be responsible. Portsmouth, as the home of the Royal Navy, will understand duty. We need to ensure that the worst possible outcomes that could permanently damage disadvantage are avoided, such as lumping us in with Southampton or the Isle of Wight. So the best plan is clear. the government should keep its hands off Portsmouth. And like my fellow Portsmouth Liberal Democrat councillors, I have stood up and called from this from the very beginning. And I stand with the 5,000 plus local residents who have signed the Hands Off Portsmouth petition. But if the government continues not to listen and chooses to force its will on Portsmouth, then the least bad option is also clear. The so-called 1A option in the report put together by all the other councils in Hampshire to which have agreed to the report that the leader has mentioned. However, my fervent hope is it will not come to that. The government should stop and listen to our plea. Please, please, keep your hands off Portsmouth.
Councillor Candish, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so we are referring ourselves back to the item on the council agenda, which was the cabinet report for tonight. So you should have that in papers or in front of you, which contained under 2.1 a series of recommendations listed 1 to 10, which include our rationale around 1A as a fallback position if left with no choice, and therefore that's in the Group of 12 submission document, the argument for that case. It also, obviously, I'll remind you, contains the case for arguing against the Counties 3 mainland unitary option. It contains the exceptional case for the Isle of Wight to remain on its own. All of that's within the 500-page document submission that's going in. The letter, which we went over at the beginning of today's meeting, is published in the appendices of the council report from the other day. So that will be our submission, which is hands off Portsmouth. But if you ignore us and you don't listen to this administration, you don't listen to this council, you don't listen to 82% of the people of Portsmouth, then 1A under the legal caveats that you've requested. So that is what we are approving if we accept the recommendations 1 to 10. Including delegating authority to the Chief Executive in consultation with me to make those final amendments to the letter which I brought to you today. Is all of that, including the amendment to the letter, so approved? Colleagues, thank you very much, and thank you for your considerations this afternoon and your huge amount of knowledge and understanding on this. It's been a long journey and we are not at the end of it yet, but we are at least at the end of this stage, so thank you. And that concludes today's meeting.